Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited for this conversation. Before we jump in, maybe it's best we start with introductions. Holly, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Danko. I am the Chief People Officer at Unison.
My name is Devin Blase, and I'm the VP of People at Truework.
My name is Nyala, and I'm the VP of People at Eden Health.
And my name is Ivori Johnson, pronoun she, her, and I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at ChartHop. I'm glad to have you all here today. I think throughout my career, I've seen diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging transform from focusing on recruiting talent to now we're thinking about how do we also retain talent to creating more of an inclusive and belonging culture when that focuses on employee engagement. Would love to start the conversation with maybe just how each of you have seen shifts in regards to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as it relates to company culture. Anyone want to start first?
I can go. I think the general ecosystem of what it means to be an employee and an employer has evolved significantly over time, but more drastically in the last few years. And I think people are recognizing their own value that companies have always spoken to, right? Employees are our greatest asset, but always in the performative sense, or typically in the performative sense. And so I think now we're seeing that shift correlate to a more profound sense of unapologetic accountability and the change in expectations that are then translated from that, going from just being at a company, hitting your goals, getting your bonus, and that being it, to how do I bring myself to an organization that is going to recognize me for what I am, what I can bring to the table versus what's expected to be brought to the table. And then we as organizations have to foster, teach, share, and learn, and then create acceptance of sort of each of those components for DEIB.
I love that. Love that. Devin or Holly, anything to add there?
Yeah, I completely agree. And from my perspective, I've seen it really shift from an HR function over the years, where we've all have had the responsibility of making sure we're paying people equally and treating them fairly. And of course, that's unbelievably important. But I've also seen it come to a strategic function within organizations, which I think is the right way to approach it. It's how are we recruiting and retaining and attracting the best talent? And then once we get them in our organizations, how do we create an organization that supports them, where there is inclusivity and there is belonging? And that affects every single function and every single person inside of the organization. So I love seeing DEIB be a strategic function and not just an HR function.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of that, it's interesting because I feel as people leaders, a lot of the work that we do is understanding what is the general consensus of what the company needs to do, and then actualizing that through policy so that it can cascade throughout the organization. And policy work, in and of itself is, a little bit it's literally setting rule sets so that you hope that they, engender the right kind of the right sort of activity. And it's been interesting to take something where you're trying to basically create authenticity for these goals and then and do it through policy work. So it's taking something that you want through almost a rigid method. I don't know. I think it's been kind of interesting about how we've actually been doing the implementation and what's working and what's not. And to be honest, I feel we've only been making a super earnest effort as corporations. I don't know, we'll just say recently. I would hate to peg a year, but I think recently is fair.
Yeah. Totally agree. I love, Holly, how you said, DIB has transformed from being kind of that HR function to being more strategic. So I know in all of our work, we're all trying to find the best solution to creating a truly inclusive and diverse workforce by really solving core inclusion and diversity gaps within our organization. So would love to just understand from you all, how do you evaluate whether a particular DEI initiative will be impactful versus performative?
Well, at least I won't speak to any one company. I'll just talk about when I've been in this role and at different companies. And different companies will honestly, unleash you or somewhat get you differing. But let's just talk about in general. I think that the key to this is trying to like always play a couple chess steps ahead. There's a lot of things that just like, we'll just say look good, performative. But like you have to like really to make sure that everybody has limited bandwidth, especially if you're like pre-IPO and there's like only so many like dollars and bodies that can be thrown at things. Trying to push like fast forward on like, okay, well, like what happens just after it is like done or unveiled? Like what is the like 3 chess steps ahead? What's going to actually like, how's this going to impact the business? And like, let's do like a conservative view of that. I think you have to like do that sort of diligence across any efforts that get brought to you, because like I said, there really are limited dollars and bodies to be throwing at these things. And I don't know, I think it's almost like an insult to the problem if you don't do that, because then you're doing nothing and you're wasting time.
Yeah.
With the ERGs in particular, every company wants to have and foster them as a contribution to DE&I impact. We sort of, to make it more, policy oriented, have a guideline that says if you're going to start an ERG, it has to actually be similar to a business proposal. It's not just there for show or be performative, but it's really going to have an impact. And in that structured guideline, it's who's the executive sponsor so that you get it cascading from top to bottom, defining their values, what is your identity, what are your goals, and even asking them to establish core outcomes is how we sort of move in a lot of different initiatives, but specifically in the ERG, that is part of the establishing process.
And I think from my perspective, using data analytics is really, really key to make sure you're getting this right. And both from a pre-initiative standpoint and a post-initiative standpoint. From pre, we do a lot of surveying of our team to ask them what they think we should do. And also there's so many companies out there doing just amazing, amazing work, but what they're doing may not work for your company culture. So I think it's, making sure you're putting together a plan that makes sense for your company. And then afterwards, surveying, collecting the data, analyzing it, and learning from your mistakes. I think a big part of DEIB is honestly, we're not always going to get this 100% right. Like it's a process of education. It's a process of learning for everyone. So I think it's, sometimes you put an initiative in place that may not be perfect. And how do you learn from that and how do you make it better the next time?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like everybody has taken all things post-mortem from the engineering org 10 years ago, and it's more useful than ever, especially in our discipline.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I love that piece around like education and awareness. And I think back to like the point around like ERGs, I think a lot of companies utilize ERGs to really create that community space, right? And really create that safe space for employees to go to, and then really to create the culture that we're looking to have. But also ERGs are very common where there isn't a dedicated DEI person or a budget. So would love to understand from you all, like, how do you leverage your ERGs as a driving force for change and for embedding DEI at all levels within your organizations?
We try to make it so that they become part of like the employee life cycle. They're like somewhat lightly marketed in our offer letter, just so that they know like, hey, when you choose this company, you'll be choosing like inclusivity in these capacities. And this is like employee led. And then it's like, we have a pretty heavy onboarding. It's a part of our onboarding. There's like a dedicated section to like, what efforts are we making and how can you join things that you might like pattern match to being a part of. And then we just try to drive it through communication and basically represent itself through like different mediums to the employee body, whether it's like our newsletter or our engagement survey being like, just for awareness, this is what's available, what's working, what did you not know? So trying to like hit the employee throughout their employee life cycle, not just like have it up in your wiki and then people like, I have a job. I'm not just like going spelunking through that wiki all day. Being reintroducing it over and over again, I think it's been like kind of crucial to us, making sure that they actually like pack a punch.
Yeah.
And I think giving an ERG a platform, I'm a big believer in ERGs. And I think whether it's a platform company-wide where they can come and present or communicate with the company is really important. But I think also a platform at the executive level is critical. And I know, not everyone has a budget and not everyone has has a lot of resources to give. But I think at the end of the day, DEIB is only successful if you really do have leadership buy-in. So I think they should have a budget, even if it's a small budget. There should be some resources that are given to the ERGs, and there should be, again, a platform for them to communicate with the company, to communicate with the executive team, and really get DEIB embedded as part of the culture and the company strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you've both said. The only thing I would add that we've sort of done that helps is a step further from the offer letter is in the interview outreach, letting them know that, hey, once you've passed a certain stage in our process, these are the ERGs we have. If you'd like to speak to any of the people in advance of deciding on your offer as another touch point, to show, but also to begin the inclusivity process at that early stage.
I just had one last question for you all. For me, I'm on a journey to really create the most inclusive and representative workforce in the world. And I'm also on a mission to help educate and bring awareness to diversity, equity, inclusion to all of, to leaders across the world as well. What legacy would you like to leave behind?
For me, it's a legacy of education as well and acceptance. I think DEIB is a truly educational process. There's 195 countries in the world, and every country and culture has its own history, its own story, and we could never know all of it. But I think it's just, wanting to have that growth mindset and constantly learn and grow and educate yourself. And in that process of learning and growing, it's accepting each other's differences, and not only accepting them, but appreciating them. Differences are what makes each of us unique. It's the value that we bring to a company. So I think, the culture of education and acceptance is really important.
I often say this, but I do believe that the most effective employee programming or the most impactful employee programming is one that re-injects the employees back into display. And so if we were to define my legacy, I would say that I want to be known as someone who ensures that whatever the company is producing or creating is a true reflection of the individuals that are there. And it's worked in a variety of ways, but that's what I love to do and feel like it's really important.
Amazing. Yeah, and I'm just listening to these answers and realizing I don't think I have enough. I don't think I have that figured out, to be honest. I think that, if I'm totally honest, I don't think that DEI will be at the very, very top of what the things that I changed for, but it definitely won't be at the very bottom. I just think that there's leaders out there that have an amazing amount of insight and thoughtfulness and probably studied it for much longer. And I'm newer to this being a driving force for everything that's in let's say 4 or 5 years and really heavy for 2 or 3 years. And there's people that have been studying this and driving this for 10, 15. So I think it'll be a part of my legacy, but I don't think that'll be at the head of. I think honestly I'm following in the trail of and wonderfully learning from the people that have figured it out a lot more. And I think that's a great thing.